before there were sermons about fallen angels, before the name Lucifer stirred whispers, before the great paintings of Michael hurling a winged adversary into fire, there were much older whispers, and in those whispers we don't find a great heavenly battle or a shining throne room shattered by war. We find something stranger, quieter, and far more ambiguous. It begins in a single brief passage in the book of Genesis. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Only 4 verses, yet they have caused centuries of speculation. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." It's cryptic. There's no clear explanation. Who are these sons of God? What does it mean that they went to human women? And who or what are the Nephilim, the heroes of old? The ancient rabbis and scholars debated this. Some insisted the sons of God were simply human rulers, kings and nobles from the ancient world who took women without restraint. In this reading, the story is about the corruption of humanity before the flood, nothing more. But others read it differently. In ancient Hebrew, the phrase "sons of God," B'nai Elohim, appears elsewhere to mean members of the divine council, heavenly beings who stand before God. In the book of Job, for instance, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. This is no ordinary assembly of human rulers. It is celestial. From this connection grew a more dangerous interpretation. These sons of God were angels. But if they were angels, they were not the obedient messengers we imagine. They saw human beauty and desired it. They crossed the boundary between heaven and earth. They took wives, not as God commanded, but as they chose. And from this forbidden union came children who were not like other humans. The Nephilim giants, men of renown, beings caught between worlds. This interpretation gained vivid detail in a book that did not make it into the Hebrew Bible, but was still known and read by many Jews of the Second Temple period, the book of Enoch. In Enoch's telling, the sons of God are called Watchers. 200 of them descend upon Mount Hermon in the days before the flood. Their leader, Semyaza, persuades them to bind themselves with an oath, for they know their plan is forbidden. One by one, they take wives, and with them they share forbidden knowledge, sorcery, astrology, the secrets of metals, the art of war, the craft of ornament and beauty. The giants, born from these unions, Enoch says, became violent tyrants. They devoured not only the labor of humans, but also their very flesh. Bloodshed filled the earth, and in heaven, the cry of injustice rose. God commands the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, to act. The Watchers are seized, bound in chains, and hurled into the depths, into the valleys of the earth, to be held in darkness until the day of judgment. Their children, the giants, are destroyed in the flood. This is a fall, but notice, it is not a rebellion in the throne room of God. It is not an army challenging his rule. It is a descent into lust and corruption, a breach of the boundary between the divine and human realms. In this version, angels fall, not because they want God's throne, but because they want what God has forbidden. What's remarkable is that in the official Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, the Book of Enoch is absent. The rabbis of later centuries, particularly after the destruction of the Second Temple, moved away from this narrative. In their teaching, angels were overwhelmingly obedient servants of God. The idea of angels falling into sin was dangerous. It blurred the lines between heaven's perfection and earth's corruption. Yet fragments of the older tradition remained. The brief Genesis account was still there, unexplained. The name Nephilim still lingered, mysterious, and undefined. Later Jewish mystical writings, such as some strands of the Kabbalah, still spoke of angels who could be tested, tempted, or even destroyed. And in some rabbinic legends, figures like Samael emerge, an angel associated with accusation, temptation, and even death. Samael is sometimes depicted as the serpent in Eden, other times as a seducer of women, other times as the angel of death himself. Though not exactly the same as the Watchers, Samael's role hints at a much older tradition, in which the heavenly host was not immune to corruption. We also find tantalizing hints in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among these ancient texts discovered at Qumran are writings that expand on the Watcher myth, blending it with apocalyptic prophecy. The community that wrote them seemed to believe they were living in a time when the spirits of the fallen angels or their giant offspring were still influencing the world through evil and deception. In other words, the earliest seeds of the fall of the angels are right here in these ancient Hebrew traditions, but they are not yet the full-grown tree we find later in Christianity. They are shadows, suggestions, pieces of a puzzle that later generations would assemble into a more dramatic whole. And the question remains, why were these stories preserved at all? Perhaps because they serve as warnings. Warnings that even beings made of light can be drawn into darkness. Warnings that boundaries once crossed lead to ruin. Warnings that heaven's perfection, once breached, can unleash chaos upon the earth. But here in the Hebrew shadows, the fall is not yet the story of Lucifer's pride. It is the story of desire. A desire so strong that it drags the divine down into the dust. If the Hebrew tradition leaves us with shadows and whispers, Christianity paints the picture in fire and thunder. It is here, in the centuries after the life of Jesus, that the scattered fragments of Scripture are gathered, stitched together, and transformed into a drama of cosmic war. A drama that would define the way much of the world imagines the fall of angels to this day. But like all great stories, it didn't arrive fully formed. It began with words that were never meant to be about angels at all. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, the prophet taunts the king of Babylon, a human ruler whose pride and cruelty had brought ruin to nations. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You, who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. In its original context, this is pure political poetry, mocking a king who thought himself invincible, only to be brought low. The morning star in Hebrew is Helo ben Sheker, a poetic name for the planet Venus, which rises bright in the dawn but quickly fades. But when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Latin, Helo became Lucifer, lightbearer. And here, in this single word, a seed was planted. The human king of Babylon could fade from memory, but the image of a glorious being cast down from the heavens, that was too vivid to remain just a metaphor. Centuries later, another piece of the puzzle was laid beside it, this one from the book of Revelation. In chapter 12, the visionary John writes of a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fight against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fight back. But the dragon is not strong enough, and he is hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, who leads the whole world astray. Here, finally, is a battle scene. Two armies, wings spread, swords drawn, the fate of heaven hanging in the balance. And when this passage was set alongside Isaiah's morning star and Ezekiel's lament over the guardian cherub who fell from perfection, Ezekiel 28, the image of a single fallen leader began to emerge. Once a prince in heaven, now the adversary of God. Early Christian teachers seized on it. Origen, in the 3rd century, described the fall as an act of free will. Certain angels, including the brightest of all, turned from God and fell into corruption. Tertullian connected this to the devil's temptation of Adam and Eve. seeing in it the same root sin, pride. Augustine made it even clearer. The devil was originally an angel, created good, who became evil by choosing self-exaltation over obedience. By the Middle Ages, the character was fully formed. His name was Lucifer, once the highest of angels, perhaps even the leader of heaven's choirs. His fall was not born of lust, like the Watchers, but of ambition. He wanted the throne itself, and when he could not have it, he would make war against the one who sat upon it. In some traditions, he took a third of the angels with him, a detail drawn from Revelation's earlier mention of the dragon sweeping a third of the stars from the sky. Stars, angels. The connection was made, and the rebel host was numbered. From this came not just theology, but imagery. Painters and poets filled in the details. The blinding light of heaven, the crash of bodies falling through the clouds, the smoking pit that would become their prison. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, Lucifer becomes the archetype of defiance. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Yet here too, the historical reality is more complex. The Bible never actually strings these pieces together into a single, continuous story. Isaiah's taunt, Ezekiel's lament, and John's apocalyptic vision all stand in their own contexts. It was the Christian imagination that fused them, taking the political metaphors of the prophets and the symbolic visions of Revelation, and turning them into literal history. Why? Perhaps because the story is powerful. It is a warning against pride, the sin the Church Fathers called superbia, the root of all others. It is a mirror of the human condition. Just as the devil fell through pride, so humanity fell in Eden. Both reached for more than was theirs to take. Both lost the paradise they had been given. In Christian thought, this cosmic war was not a past event alone. It was, and is, an ongoing struggle. The devil and his angels cast out of heaven now work to deceive humanity, to draw them into the same rebellion. Every temptation, every lie, every act of violence in the world is framed as part of this continuing conflict. The war in heaven has spilled over into earth, and so, by the time the medieval cathedrals were rising in stone and glass, the story was fully embedded. Lucifer's pride had broken the peace of heaven. Michael's sword had driven him down. His fall was final, his fate sealed. But his war far from over. From the Hebrew shadows, the idea had grown into a blazing epic. And yet, even here, the story was still not universal. Another tradition, one just as old, but told in a different language and with a different logic, would tell the tale in an entirely new way. By the time the Quran was revealed in the 7th century, the Jewish and Christian worlds had already been telling stories of angelic rebellion for centuries. Some of those stories had filtered through the ancient Near East, carried by trade, conquest, and conversation. Some were enshrined in scripture, others lived in the oral traditions of rabbis, monks, and poets. So when the Quran began to speak of a great fall, listeners might have expected it to echo the tales they had already heard. But what they found was a story both familiar and radically different. The Quran's central figure of defiance is called Iblis. His name appears in multiple chapters, each time in the context of the same moment, the creation of the first human being. The scene is always the same. God announces that he will create a new being, made of clay, shaped by his own hands and filled with his spirit. Then God commands the angels to bow in recognition of this creation, and all the angels obey, except one. "I am better than he," says Iblis. "You created me from fire, and him from clay." It is a rejection born not of lust, as with the Watchers, nor of ambition for God's throne, as in the Christian Lucifer. It is the sin of arrogance, the belief that one's nature makes one superior, even in the face of God's command. For this act, Iblis is cast out. In the Quran's language, he is Rajram, accursed, rejected. He is granted respite until the day of judgment, but his role from that moment is fixed. to lead astray those among humanity who will follow him, to whisper, to tempt, to deceive. But here's where the Islamic telling draws a sharp line. The Quran states clearly that Iblis was not an angel. He was one of the jinn. The jinn are a separate creation, beings made of smokeless fire, endowed with free will, capable of both good and evil. Angels, by contrast, are created from light. In Islamic theology, angels have no capacity for disobedience. They are, by nature, perfect servants of God's will. They carry out his commands without hesitation. This is a major departure from the Jewish and Christian traditions we've explored. In Islam, the concept of fallen angels simply doesn't exist in the theological sense. Angels are, and always have been, sinless. The rebellion of Iblis does not prove that angels can fall. It proves that free will carries danger, no matter the nature of the being who possesses it. Yet, as Islam spread across lands already steeped in biblical and apocryphal traditions, the lines sometimes blurred in popular storytelling. Folklore, shaped by contact with Christian and Jewish neighbors, occasionally depicted Iblis with angelic qualities. Poets and storytellers, especially in Persian and Ottoman traditions, sometimes called him a former angel, or described him as one who once stood among the heavenly host. These were cultural adaptations, not doctrinal truths, but they allowed the familiar pattern of a fallen angel to survive at the edges of Muslim storytelling. The Quran also preserves echoes of older tales without fully endorsing them. It speaks of Harut and Marut, two angels sent to Babylon who taught people sorcery, but always with a warning: we are a test for you, so do not disbelieve. In Islamic exegesis, this episode is treated cautiously. Were Harut and Marut fallen, or simply agents of a divine test? The answers vary, but the careful framing preserves the principle. Angels themselves remain obedient, even when placed in morally dangerous positions. And then there is the connection to the serpent of Eden. In Christian tradition, the serpent is often identified with the devil, the fallen angel Lucifer in disguise. In Islam, the serpent is absent from the narrative entirely. The one who tempts Adam and his wife is Iblis himself, directly, without animal intermediary. This too reinforces the Islamic reframing. The adversary is not a transformed angel, but a jinn in his own right. In the Islamic worldview, then, the cosmic hierarchy is cleaner. God is supreme. Angels obey. Jinn, like humans, choose, and can choose wrongly. The fall is not a story about the corruption of heaven's perfect servants, but about the stubbornness of a will that refuses to submit to truth. And yet, despite these theological distinctions, the human imagination tends to seek patterns. When Muslims hear of Iblis' refusal and his exile, they may still picture the imagery of angels falling from the sky, wings ablaze. Imagery borrowed from neighbors and passed down through the shared cultural memory of the ancient Near East. In this way, the story of Iblis becomes both a rejection and an adaptation of the fall motif. It keeps the drama, the act of defiance, the judgment, the exile, but roots it in a different cosmology, one where angels remain spotless, and the blame rests entirely with a creature of another order. It is a reminder that even when the same archetype, the rebel in the courts of heaven, appears in multiple traditions, its meaning can be transformed by the worldview in which it is told. And as we will see, these transformations did not begin with the Abrahamic faiths. For long before the names of Michael, Lucifer, or Iblis were spoken, the ancient world was already telling of divine beings cast down from the heights, long before anyone spoke of angels or jinn, long before Hebrew, Greek, or Arabic shaped the words of Scripture. The ancient Near East was already telling stories of beings who dwelt in the heights and who fell. In these earliest civilizations, the heavens were never imagined as an untouched realm of eternal peace. The sky was a place of conflict, just as the earth was. The divine was not always united, and the idea that a god or a godlike being could be cast down from the heights was a theme as old as recorded myth. Let's begin in Mesopotamia, the cradle of writing, law, and empire. Here, in the clay tablets of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, we find the Anunnaki, a council of great gods who ruled over human fate. They were not angels in the later sense, but they were intermediaries between the highest heavens and the mortal world. Some dwelt in the sky, others in the underworld, and their ranks were not immune to rivalry or punishment. One of the oldest combat myths is that of Anzu, a divine bird-like being who served the god Enlil. In one version of the tale, Anzu steals the Tablet of Destinies, a cosmic object granting supreme authority over the universe. By taking it, Anzu disrupts the divine order, claiming power for himself. He is hunted down by the warrior, Dodna-Nurta, defeated and stripped of his prize. Though the language is mythic, the shape of the story is clear. A trusted servant, desiring more than his place allows, is overthrown and cast down. Then there is the great Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. At its heart is a battle between generations of gods. The younger gods, led by Marduk, rise against the primordial mother Tiamat. They slay her, split her body in two, and use it to form the heavens and the earth. While this is not a fall in the later angelic sense, it is the template for a cosmic rebellion, a clash in the divine realm that reshapes creation itself. In Ugarit, a Canaanite city on the coast of the Levant, another story unfolds. Here the storm god Baal battles Yam, the sea god, for kingship over the gods. Yam is defeated, cast down, and stripped of his authority. Later, Baal himself descends into the underworld to face Mo, the god of death, and is held there until rescued. Again, we see divine beings rising and falling, power shifting, and the heavens themselves marked by conflict. The Greeks, inheriting and transforming these older patterns, gave the world the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympian gods. The Titans, the elder generation, are overthrown by Zeus and his siblings. Those who fought against the Olympians are cast into Tartarus, a deep abyss below even Hades. In the words of the poet Hesiod, they dwell at the furthest point beneath the earth, where the gates of darkness are, beyond the reach of day. It is impossible not to hear the echo of later tales of angels bound in chains, awaiting judgment. In the Zoroastrian tradition of ancient Persia, we find an even closer parallel to the war in heaven motif. Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, creates the spiritual and material worlds. But Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, rises against him, seeking to corrupt all creation. This is no equal contest. Ahura Mazda is supreme, but the struggle is real, and it unfolds both in the heavenly realm and in the human world. Angra Mainyu is not a fallen servant, but a primordial adversary. Yet the pattern of a cosmic enemy cast down into a realm of darkness is present. Across these cultures, the details differ. Birds instead of winged men, seas instead of skies, titans instead of angels. But the shape of the story remains. Power is challenged, the challenger is defeated, and from the high place they fall. Why does this pattern repeat? Perhaps because these stories are more than entertainment. They are mirrors of human life. In every court, there are rivals. In every city, there are betrayals. And in every human heart, there is the fear and fascination of what happens when the highest is brought low. So, when the Hebrew prophets, the early Christians, and the Quranic revelations spoke of heavenly rebellion, they were not speaking into a vacuum. They were speaking into a world where the very idea of the divine was already shaped by centuries of mythic conflict. And perhaps, just perhaps, those older myths were themselves shaped by something deeper still, a memory that humanity carried without fully understanding it. Whether that memory was of real events or only of the universal human experience of pride and downfall is a question we may never answer. But the shape of the fall, that shape has been with us since the first stories were told. If the fall of angels began as a whisper in the Hebrew scriptures, grew into a blazing war in Christian imagination, and was reframed entirely in the Quran, its echoes today are louder than ever. But now they ring not only from pulpits and sacred scrolls, they echo from cinema screens, paperbacks, streaming series, and the endless scroll of the internet. Walk into a bookstore, and you'll find them on the covers. Dark-winged figures silhouetted against burning skies, swords in hand, eyes glowing with defiance. Search your streaming app, and you'll find them in dramas that weave angels and demons into modern city streets, giving them human flaws and tangled love affairs. In some of these modern retellings, the fallen are tragic heroes, misunderstood rebels who sought freedom against a tyrannical heaven. In others, they are purely monstrous, ancient predators wearing human faces. Both images trace their lineage back through centuries of art and theology, but both are filtered now through the lens of modern storytelling, where no villain is entirely evil and no hero entirely pure. We see them in Paradise Lost, in the Divine Comedy, in the stained glass of medieval cathedrals. We see them in comic books, in anime, in music videos, in concept art that spreads across social media like wildfire. Even video games now draw on the same imagery: blazing wings, heavenly armor, the shattering of light against darkness. And always, somewhere beneath the surface, is the same question: what would make a perfect being fall? Some creators answer with the ancient cause: pride, the desire to rise above one's station. Others choose lust, echoing the Watcher's longing for human beauty. Still others point to injustice, a heaven that is itself flawed, driving its servants to rebellion. In doing this, we've reshaped the fallen angel into a reflection of ourselves. No longer simply a warning of what they became, it is now a mirror of what we might become. The pride, the temptation, the longing to break the rules. These are as human as they are angelic. Psychologists have even suggested that our enduring fascination with this story taps into an archetype Carl Jung called the shadow, the part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the part that, if repressed too long, eventually breaks free in destructive ways. The fallen angel becomes a cosmic version of this shadow, the repressed pride, the hidden desire, the secret rebellion finally unleashed. And so, the story survives, not because everyone believes it as literal truth, but because it resonates on a level deeper than belief. You don't need to accept the existence of heaven or angels to understand the danger of ambition without humility. You don't need to believe in Lucifer or Iblis to see how the lust for power or beauty or control can transform the noble into the cruel. Yet, for many, the story is not metaphor at all. For believers across the world, the fall of angels remains a real event, a fracture in the history of creation whose consequences still shape every human life. In this view, the modern depictions are not harmless fiction, but glimpses, distorted though they may be, of a truth far older than human memory. And perhaps this is the most haunting thing about the tale. Whether you see it as myth, metaphor, or literal history, it demands a response. If even beings made of light can fall, what hope have we? Or, turning the question around, if even beings made of light can fall, what hope have they? Because if pride and desire can rise in the courts of heaven, if rebellion can take root among those closest to the divine, then perfection is not a guarantee. Not for angels, not for humans, perhaps not for anything at all. And so we return to the question we began with. Did angels really fall from heaven? In Judaism, we saw only fragments. The Watchers in Enoch, the Nephilim of Genesis, the hints in Job, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. In Christianity, we saw the fragments woven into a vivid war, Lucifer's pride, Michael's victory, the dragon hurled down. In Islam, we saw a reframing angels, untouched by sin, and a rebel of fire instead of light. And beneath them all, in the oldest myths of Mesopotamia, Canaan, Greece, and Persia, we saw the archetype itself. The challenger who rises is defeated and is cast down. Perhaps the story began in heaven. Perhaps it began in the human heart. Either way, it has never left us. And if angels fell once, it begs the question, what else was cast out that day? That is a story for another time. A journey beyond the gates of heaven itself. But before you go, I have a request. If this journey stirred your curiosity, if you found yourself leaning closer to catch every word, then join me for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss when we open the next ancient door. Like this video so the story travels further, and share your own thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the fall was history, myth, or something in between? The conversation doesn't end here. It's only just begun.